Welcome to season 2 of Where Passion Meets Purpose. I'm your host, Jen Mentasana. Each week, I sit down with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and trailblazers who share their raw, real stories of perseverance, resilience, and building a life and business with impact. We talk about everything from entrepreneurship and family to purpose and living fully. My goal is to inspire you to start that dream, push through the hard seasons, and wake up every single day ready to live the life you were born to live with passion and purpose. Welcome back, everyone, to Where Passion Meets Purpose. Today, we are back in the studio. You know I love that. And I have my favorite guest so far on this show, and I know that's going to offend a lot of people, but Kim Witczak was one of my very first guests, and we had such an incredible conversation that I could not wait to have her back on the show. And I got to have her here in person in the studio. Kim is a drug safety advocate. She is a creative in the advertising agency, and she has an incredible story that all of you can listen to if you go back to my very first season and listen to episode 8 with Kim Witczak. It is an incredible story, and we're going to dive into some of that today, but we're also going to follow up with Kim and find out what she's been up to since that conversation and all of the amazing things she's doing in the world for everyone, women's health, all of our health, and how she's helping women step into their own voice. So Kim, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you're back on the show.
Oh my gosh. Well, thanks for having me. It's really fun to be in studio. So
Yeah.
Way better than being on Zoom.
100%. I mean, I was just saying to you that we had a great conversation. I was listening back to it this morning, leading up to this conversation, just to kind of get some tidbits. And I was like, wow, that was pretty good conversation for my 8th episode. But honestly, being in person with you, we have had many conversations in the last year and a half, in person, sharing a hotel room at different events, and just talking about our stories and what we're going through and how we're trying to make an impact in the world. And every single time I talk to you, I learn so much. I get deeper in touch with humanity and what this mission of making an impact is really about. And you have become one of those lights in my life. And I'm just so grateful that we're doing this together. And I'm so glad to have you back on the show, because I know that you've been doing so much with so many, advocacy programs and things since we had you on last. And I want our listeners to hear what you've been up to. So thank you so much for being here.
Gosh, thank you. I'm really, really honored. And I feel the exact same way. And I cannot believe that was your 8th show. You're such a natural.
Oh, thanks, girl. Thank you. Kim's story is incredible. Why don't I just let you touch on what happened and take us back to that day? I think it was 21 or 22 years ago now.
Sure. I'd like to call myself the accidental advocate. As you said, 22 years ago, on August 6, 2003, my life came crashing down. I was happily married to my husband of almost 10 years, talking about having a family. And in one phone call from my dad telling me that my husband was found dead, took his own life at age 37. I was out of town. That was the last conversation I could have ever imagined my dad calling to tell me. My husband has just started his dream job with a startup company, having trouble sleeping, goes to his doctor. I always call him Humpty Dumpty because the doctors always fixed him. And he was given an antidepressant for insomnia. 5 weeks later, took his own life with absolutely no history of depression or mental health issues. And so, like you can imagine, when I got that call, my entire life not only came crashing down, but I also had to go back and try to intuitively make sense of something that made absolutely no sense. And so to listen to you say 22 years, and it'll actually be 23 coming up in August, I look at it and still say, I can't believe this is my life. Like, I still can't, but yet it's been my life for the last, over 2 decades. And so it's my mission now to talk about these conversations, but also to have the hard reality conversation about our system, our pharmaceuticals that we take, that we trust from our doctors. And, I was one of those girls that just blindly trusted. And truthfully, I didn't even know it was an antidepressant. Mm-hmm. So here we are. And thanks for having me back in here.
Yeah, I think it's so important, the work that you're doing. And even since our initial conversation, so much has transpired in terms of awareness around what's going on in our health system. And I think people like you who are advocating not just about drug safety, but about pharma in general, just about our doctors and this being a business and how, and not to offend any doctors out there, they're doing their jobs, but they aren't always educated on what's going on. A lot of times there's a lot of things behind the scenes that are being pushed that they aren't even aware of. And so this is a conversation that I have been wanting to have with you for a year and a half about how do we get more educated? How do we ask the right questions? How do we learn who to trust in this world? Because we're all trying to we're just trying to live our lives, trying to take care of our families, trying to run our businesses. And then we also now have to take on this whole idea that we have to put our health in our own hands because maybe the people out that are creating these drugs and doing this work aren't really thinking about what's best for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I always say that we should be our own best advocates and our loved ones' best advocates. And through the work that I've done, and as you had mentioned earlier, I have spent my entire career in advertising and marketing. So I have seen a lot of this work through the eyes of a marketer, right? And I've also sat the last 9 years, I sat on the FDA Psychopharmacologic Drugs Advisory Committee as the consumer rep, understanding how drugs are being, that come into the market through the FDA. And, I think, and this is the exact same committee that in 1991, there was a hearing on the emergence of violence and suicide with Prozac. And almost every one of those advisory board members, which I am today, took money from pharmaceutical companies that made antidepressant products. So, of course, they all went, nope, I don't see anything. And fast forward, we didn't have any warnings, and it took, 2004, 2006 when I helped to get black box warnings put on these drugs. And so through that whole process, I have come to see healthcare is a big business. And it drives a lot of my patient safety advocates crazy when I say we are customers, not patients, because patients are how they have to have patients to go to business, right? And so I have dug deep, and I have something called the spider web of influence, and I have the doctor and the patient. So we trust our doctors, right? And I think the whole system is kind of built on trust, where our doctors trust and assume that the FDA has done due diligence on looking at the products that they're approving and putting on the market. However, there's our problem, is we've kind of outsourced our trust. And, doctors, and I always say the same, doctors, regulators, they're not the ones that have to live with any harms. They might say, oh, it's, no big deal, or it's a small percent. But if something should happen, it's you and I and our kids that have to live with the hard realities. And so I always say, remember, take that as your first, you're in charge. Don't blindly trust the system. That's what we did. I didn't even ask questions. And I guarantee you, Woody did not ask a question. When he was given a pill, he said, oh, this will take the edge off and help you sleep. And didn't even know it was an antidepressant. And I think one of the most foundational principles for anything, and especially when I look at the mental health drugs, is informed consent. And informed consent means that you are also given of course they're going to sell. The system sells benefits, right? It's going to tell you this is going to save your life. Everything's about, and we're one of only 2 countries in the world that allow drug ads. So it sells the benefits, but you really should know about, I think, the harms, and I also think that is what we need, that level set conversation. So I also think that people should ask about or find out if there's any lawsuits. Mm-hmm. Because lawsuits don't come out of the blue. And so if there's a lawsuit, there's usually some harms. And so, I would I think about the time when I jumped out of an airplane, right? Skydived, and they said, here's, they give you all those forms, and you're like, that'll never happen to me. And you just kind of sign it without ever thinking. Well, that is almost in some ways the way we should be approaching any medication we take, is really think about what we're doing, what you're putting in your body, because trust me, the harms, in fact, later this month in March, it is going to be the third adverse reactions from properly prescribed medications is the third leading cause of death in America. And that is coming up. And so I think we don't want to talk about it. But the reality is, we should talk about it, because no one should be like the mother that called me last week, 12 years old. Her little daughter took her own life. And she said the exact same words that I said, which is, how come we didn't know? And that is my mission, is to make sure nobody asks those questions after the fact.
Yes. Wow. That's insane to think. 12 years old, so young. You just said something that really hit home to me about talking about jumping out of an airplane, because I did the same thing, and you kind of sign your life away, right? Before you get into that, you keep that backpack on, you're signing your life away. They don't make you do that at the doctor's office. And what I've learned over time now, and especially since the pandemic, and I would love to dive into that a little bit with you if you're willing to, is that the doctors that I've talked to will say, well, we study the risk, right? We look at risk. We don't necessarily look at, yes, it could happen, but your risk of this is greater. Well, here's the thing. As an individual, you need to be explained what that risk is, and whether you should be able to be the one to choose to take on that risk or not, because it's your body. And I think that's the conversation. Like, I started to listen to that word risk. Well, we just basically look at percentages of risk, and that's how we make a decision. Well, 20% is still 20%. And do you want to be part of that 20%? And I think having that real conversation, well, I could be one of the 20%. So think hard before you choose to do this. Is this going to save your life? And it's a life or death that you have to do it. And then from there, make the assessment. Because I think that's the biggest thing, is that we're not really given the truth about even the 10%, the 5%, the 1%, what that looks like.
Absolutely. And then I just want to remind you that even if it's a tiny 1% chance, if it happens to you or your family, it's your 100%.
Right.
So it really does matter. And I think, a lot of people don't think the harms are going to happen. But even when you start really diving in and understanding how clinical trials are done initially to get the product on the market, the whole system initially is controlled by the pharmaceutical company. They design the product, they design the clinical studies. They work with the FDA to try to, have them agree to these protocols, et cetera. But they control who goes in it. They control the data. The FDA just gets summaries of data. They're not getting patient-level data. And so the whole system is still run by a company who is beholden not to you and I, and it's I don't blame them. I mean, they're beholden to shareholders. This is why I go back to, they are a business.
Right. It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it and you explain it. I didn't ever know until I met you that the clinical trials are done by the pharmaceutical company that's putting the drug out. So it is a jaded perspective for sure. I wanted to touch on this because I think it was just a few days ago, or maybe it was a week ago, that there were studies that came out that said they're now putting black box labels on the COVID-19 vaccines for kids. And I know that this is a touchy subject. This is not a political conversation. I just would love to open this up, because I was one of those people back in 2020 who just, my gut told me, do not take this. Do not give this to your kids. My kids were 12 and 10. And I was like, you know what? No. And there were times where they weren't able to play on their sports teams. We're here in California. They had to sit out. They did not get to go to certain activities if they were not showing the vaccine. And we chose as a family that was the right thing for us. I didn't know why. I just had this belief that we didn't have enough information. And I understand the people that chose to give that to their kids and chose to say, well, they are in high school and they won't get to go and participate in these activities or do these things if they don't get the vaccine. And now we're finding out that all of the deaths that have been happening to kids from this vaccine. And you were one of the people who actually got black box labels put on the antidepressant drugs initially. Talk to me about the black box warning and what that means.
Sure. Well, a black box warning is the most serious of any FDA warnings. It usually means there's a death associated with it or a serious harm associated with it. So the fact that and a lot of times it doesn't the drugs don't come on the market with it on black box warnings, right? It's usually once it's in the real world setting and they start seeing these harms emerge, and then a warning may or may not go on. So like in the case of antidepressants, it took them 13 years after the first FDA warning or hearing in 91 to actually put warnings out. And so I think about that. So for me, when the COVID vaccines came out, for me, I saw a lot of the similar kind of, like, wait, you're giving these companies, the makers of the vaccine, complete legal immunity, like Pfizer? Wait, the company that I actually sued for Zoloft, you're giving them complete legal immunity? Help me understand. Like, that's where harms, like, if you're going to, and then they started mandating it in order for you to participate in society. And then you start looking at the data. And I was very involved initially in trying to get, because it came on the market really fast, right? Within like a short time, and everybody's like, yeah, but that's technology. Yeah, but with technology also means that we don't really know the potential or the future risks. So I love what you said, that something intuitively told you, hey, hold on, we're not going to do this for our family right now, right? I had that same kind of intuition. I said, I will wait until it's been on the market for multiple years. Then I will decide, because by that time you're going to see harms. And with the warnings now that are on those COVID vaccines for kids, we saw initially like myocarditis, and it was the heart and the things that these were healthy kids that you're like, wait a minute, they're healthy. And if they do get the virus, and I understand, because at that point we didn't really know what this whole COVID, was, or the virus. But I think over time they started to see it, meaning the regulators, and there were organizations and families and individuals that were starting to get impacted. And then again, probably because I have this years of experience, right? I knew to look, and a lot of the people who were speaking out were gaslit, or they were told, and communities were taken off like the Facebook. And I get it, we were in a pandemic, but literally we couldn't have conversations. So we wouldn't even be able to have this conversation. And now looking for the fact, it's really hard, because I know a couple parents who lost their kids to a COVID vaccine, heart, and their bodies just stopped. And I look at that now, and on one hand, I'm sure it feels like, hey, we got a warning, but at the cost of what?
Exactly. I think, and I bring this up, and I because I want women who are mothers, women who are, wives, whatever, to start to think more carefully about their choices when it comes to their health, drugs, and trusting that everything that your doctor tells you need is not necessarily the case. I think it's not about scaring anyone. It's just about becoming, I know, because look, you and I grew up in the same generation. Our parents just did what their doctor said. We got the vaccines, no one questioned anything, and we went along like that for 30, 40 years, right? And now we're learning that this has become a business. And it's not to scare anyone, it's just to start paying attention more to the fact that you need to be your own best advocate. And I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want
absolutely.
to switch gears here for a second, because all of this work you've been doing for 22 years now, you have not, this is really a passion project for you. This is advocacy. This is not your job. This is not your career, but it has turned into your purpose. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that means to you and where you think that that's taking you. Because I think there's a lot of people out there who have found themselves in these situations where they've had an incident happen and it's turned into their life's purpose and their mission, but then it opens the door to something beyond that. And it's something that you would have never expected. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about where you are in your life now. I know you're still doing the drug advocacy thing, but you're speaking, you're writing a book. There's so many things you're doing now. And I want our listeners to hear what this path forward is for you.
As I opened up saying accidental advocate, I never chose to do this work, but come to realize that sometimes our greatest purposes choose us. And, I have been doing the drug safety, but I never chose to do this. But I said, here I am, because I prayed a prayer to God, and it had nothing to do with what I did, right? Like the advocacy, it was like, just take my pain and use it. And that was my prayer, is take my pain and use it. And I think, because if you actually knew who I was before this, there's not a chance I would go and stir the pot. Now, everybody on the outside now thinks, oh, she's so strong. I'm like, no, you have no idea who I was and who I was before that. And I had two sides of me too, right? For whatever reason, God gave me the strength to go out. And maybe I've come to realize a lot of that was because of the way I was raised as a kid, that we just kept all of our emotions. I cried to my cat. My mom didn't know that I was crying. And so I'm like, oh, wait, maybe along my whole life, I've been set up with the skills that can go take something that it can help somebody else. And so I look at that and because I didn't choose this, but I was available to be used, right? And it profoundly changed me, because I kept thinking, what if somebody in 1991 would have been the voice for Woody? Now I have the ability to be the voice for somebody else, and just kind of this pay forward. And so that is one thing. I'll continue to do that. But I really also believe that there's a message that we have the ability, like one person's voice can actually make a huge difference. And I think there's that whole, like, it's the butterfly effect. You go do what the thing that is your thing. It's not supposed to be like what I do and what I've been given as my kind of purpose, legacy, what I can pay forward is not what somebody else, it drives me crazy when they're like, well, I can never do that. I'm like, well, first of all, you're not supposed to. That wasn't what you were given. But I guarantee you there's probably something in your heart that you are like pulled towards and being called forward, whatever it is. And it could be a kid project. It could be your kid. You want to be like, it doesn't even matter. But to think that well, I don't know how to do it, or I couldn't do it. Yes, you can, because I'm living proof of that.
Exactly. I love this so much. This is what this show is about. So for me, I'm all about finding your thing. And it's funny, you mentioned that, like how someone would say to you, oh, I could never do that. I was literally just having a conversation on the phone with a friend on Thursday evening after, you and I saw each other at the Wild X event. And I had just gotten on stage and spoke in front of all these people and got judged and blah, blah, blah. And you did the same thing a few months prior. And a couple of my girlfriends came to watch. And one of them said on the way home in the car, I could never do that. I don't know how she did. I could never do that. And I wanted to say, no one thinks that anyone should have to get up on a stage if you don't want to. It's not about that. It's about what's your thing. Like, what is that thing, like you said, that's pulling you forward, that is your innate purpose in life? That's the thing. And yours happened by accident, but now you're finding that it's even beyond what your advocacy has been. It's about standing up, having a voice, empowering others to stand up and use their voice. And I think that's the beautiful thing, is that it keeps evolving, and you don't know right out of the gate. Like, I didn't know when I wanted to be, the next Mary Hart on Entertainment Tonight, and that didn't happen. And then I, fast forward, went down a whole another path and found my way back, but it was through a podcast. And now I'm exploring speaking, and now I'm having all these other things. You don't know until you step forward. And once you listen to your intuition and that pull, that's when the path unfolds. It doesn't unfold for you out of the gate and say, oh, ta-da, comes out of the clouds, here's your life and your life's purpose and your path. No, you have to have faith and take that first step and move forward and trust, and it unfolds as you move forward. And I think that is the most beautiful message for any woman who's feeling like there's something more that they have to do in this world, because you've been at this for 21 years. I mean, easily you could probably at some point say, okay, FDA, I'm done, and I'm going to continue with my creative work, and I'm going to go travel, and I'm going to do this thing. But you're still being called.
Yeah. And I think there is something really important to listen to that voice that is calling, that even when I think I want to quit, and I always joke, I'm like, when am I ever going to retire? God, let me retire from this work. Then I get another email, or I get something, or also this idea that I want people to realize, imagine if we all took the thing that calls us forward, and we're all meant to do different things, but imagine how great the world would be. Right? We all did our thing. Like, somebody's doing food safety. Somebody wants to do this. Somebody wants to have the best thing for kids, all of that. If we all did and put our best foot forward, whatever is calling you, imagine. And then this idea that you're going to have it all planned out. No, that's not how it works. And first of all, I don't know that I would ever, even if I could have one wish and said, God, let me see what my life would look like. And then I saw that, oh, you're going to get married and your husband's going to die. I'd be like, oh, no. So I'm actually glad that isn't how it works.
Right.
When I look back at that was just taking a step forward and following faith and a breadcrumb, and a door opens over here and you go through there and then it shuts. Well, then you're quickly over here. And so I think there's this idea of being open, but being called forward in motion.
Correct.
In motion.
I have to touch on what you just said about, because I think I wrote this sentence in my book at some point, about imagine if everyone on the planet remembered their purpose and why they are really here, and tapped back into that and listened and followed that. That is the intention of what I believe is God. Whatever you choose to believe is totally fine. But that is what I believe is our purpose on this planet, human beings. And if we could all just stay connected to that inner voice, that higher power, intuition, guiding us down whatever path it is, imagine what the world would look like.
Oh, I know. It's such a great way of thinking about, because it is, in my mind, a manifestation of God, which is we all came in this world as creators. As I've always said, we're creative beings, which does not necessarily, and people are oh, that's art. No. It's creative and self-expression. And we come in, and I always, I just had a friend that had a grandbaby, which is kind of crazy. But I was like, those little kids are our greatest teachers, because they're so close to where they came from, the other world, right? And to watch and learn and see who they are, and all the things that I think is just, I guess maybe this is where I'm at in my life also, is the idea of curiosity. Mm-hmm. Curiosity blending with faith, blending with just action forward. And And imagine how great this world can be, because we all came in this world to do something. It's why we're little kids, children of God.
Yeah, I agree. So let me ask you this question then, put you on the spot. If someone out there is listening and saying, okay, I guess I can get my brain around that, but how do I connect? Like, I don't know how to listen to my intuition. I don't know. I don't feel called. I feel like stuck. I feel like this is just my life. I'm living one day at a time on the hamster wheel, doing my thing. And I deep down believe that I have a purpose, but I don't know what that is. How do we guide people who are in that position? I have thoughts, but I would be so curious to hear what you think.
Well, I think one of the first is getting still. And I think we're so afraid, and I can say we, because I should really say me. Like, I used to run 1,000,000 miles a minute before Woody died. Like, I was always out. I was never still with my emotions. Like, because a lot of times we're afraid of what we're hearing, or what is, because I think we have a voice, and if we ask, the intuition is there. But I think when we're running, or even taking that little pause to be still. And then I love that idea, but I also love the idea of doing the mirror test. And if nobody's ever, I love the mirror test. So you go in, look at yourself in the mirror, not to check out and go, what you look like. You literally stare at yourself and ask any kind of question that you want to know. Like, and you literally, you can't hide from your soul that looks back at you. And you, like, a lot of times when I've done that, it'll like completely, like, I will start crying because I know I'm not being honest with myself. Wow. And so I think the mirror test for me has been really, really an important part of, is this something I can do? And then I think, the 3 a.m. wake up call, which, interesting, that is how I got into this with Woody, who didn't understand that he was a guy that could sleep 8 hours, and it was the 3 a.m. that was like waking him up. But a lot of times the 3 a.m., it's a shift that I would love to have people think about, which is when that 3 a.m. wake up call comes, which we all have, that wakes you up in the middle of the night. What is it? Like, sometimes that is like the only time we're still. And there might be something, whether it's a problem you're working through, or there's like something that wants to be born through you as a human, is coming to you at that time, because it's the first time you're quiet.
That is so powerful, Kim. I have never heard anyone describe that before. First of all, I never heard the mirror test before. So I'm going to do that, because I've looked at myself in the mirror. Yeah, I think I didn't know it was called the mirror test. Yeah. And I've done that, where I've looked at myself in the mirror and I can literally see through myself, and I'm like, you're not being honest with yourself about something. And I have definitely done that. But that's the first time I've ever thought about it in perspective of using it as a way to get in touch with your soul. The 3 a.m. wake up call, wow. Well, my story, that I actually woke up in the middle of the night, full-blown panic attack. And that's when I had my moment with God and my aha moment. And why I'm here doing this podcast is because of that moment, that 3 a.m. moment. But I'm thinking about my husband, who wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning constantly. And I'm sure that, the universe or God or whatever is knocking, and he just thinks it's because he can't get back to sleep. And so I love this, because I'm sure that everyone out there listening has had that 3 a.m. moment. So what would you suggest doing in that 3 a.m. moment to maybe turn that into the shift of, what is this my soul or my higher power or something is trying to tell me? Like, how would you delve deeper into that?
Well, I think one of the first things I do is I always, before I go to bed, instead of like watching news or like doing your to-do list and all of that is my time of, what am I putting into my brain, into my subconscious, that I'm going to be now marinating in the next 8 hours. Is it crazy? Is it fear? Is it all the worry that I have? Or is it peace? And then I do like to ask a question, like, is there something I'm supposed to learn? Because sometimes our dreams that wake us up are something, write them down. You may not even know what it means at that moment. But I think there's so much, and even if you do get woken up and it's like you're afraid and you're thinking of all the things that you have to do tomorrow, and it's this that actually is a piece of information too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And then to actually sit, trust me, that was a shift for me, that 3 a.m. wake up call. But it was a mental shift because in the past, I used to oh my gosh, if I don't go to sleep, that means if I go to sleep now, that'll mean I'll have one more hour and then I'll be really tired. And I'm I'm watching myself tell myself something versus now, what is it that you're trying to teach me? What is it that you want me to know? Now, it may not be black and white. Here it is. Because a lot of things in life are not black and white. They're shades of gray, and they're like little nuggets here, and you have to start connecting them. But you had that big 3 a.m. crisis.
Yep.
But imagine that would have been, sure, but that crisis was actually trying to get your attention, and eventually it led you down the path to doing what you're doing now.
Exactly. I just shared on the stage the other day this framework that I've started to use to help my clients tap more into their intuition, and it's really this letting go of, that which isn't serving you. And part of that is the rushing, the constant need to be busy, the constant need to listen to everybody else's advice and what they think that you should be doing. You're letting go of all of that and getting quiet enough to listen to your own intuition, because I think the world is coming at us so quickly and we're reacting everywhere to everybody else's needs. And if you can't sit with yourself and get quiet and just let go of everything else, you will never hear it. You will never get through the crap that you're going through. It will keep you stuck, because if you don't allow yourself to listen and be open, you will keep pushing it away and therefore never process it and never get past it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that is such an important thing, is getting quiet and then being open. Like I always say to people, be open to the possibility that there are connection to your higher power, that there are nudges. They whisper, they don't shout. They do not shout. They are little nudges, little breadcrumbs, as I like to call them, God winks, aha moments, whatever you want to call them, guiding you. But if you aren't quiet, you will not hear them. And then it's that once you can let go of all that and be open, then it's visualizing yourself sitting in your higher power, sitting in that connection to your intuition, to whatever you believe, the universe, atoms, whatever you want to believe.
Yeah.
Connect. Don't push it away. Connect. And eventually those messages come through. It will happen. It's a matter of letting go and trusting. And I think that's the biggest thing that I tell people. It's I don't know how to find my purpose. It's not necessarily always action. Action comes after.
Mm-hmm.
You take action after you get the breadcrumb.
Absolutely.
After you get quiet and you open. And sometimes for people, that means getting quiet for a few months. That means maybe, you're realizing you're in a season where you're pushing everything away and you need to get quiet and maybe slow down a little bit and stop making plans every single minute of the day so that you stay busy. Maybe this is a time to check in with yourself and say, hey, if I'm not feeling connected, how can I slow down in my life? And remove some things that are keeping me from being connected to myself.
Well, you look at that, and that kind of reminds me of the seasons, right? Just how nature, we're not always in production. Look at winter. I live in Minneapolis. It's winter. But that season's actually really important for spring and then the harvest and growth. And, as you know, I love butterflies. And if you think about what the butterfly is, a lot of the time is in the darkness and in that chrysalis, and it's being quiet and still, and it might feel like nothing's happening, but the reality is there's always something happening. And I think for so long, I think it's hard when everything's coming at you, and now we live in the world of social media, and then you think you're never, it's not enough, but you're going to be living somebody else's, you're so much input that you don't even know who you are. And that's where I think really stopping and being in the place of maybe the unknown that scares. I know, trust me, I know, because it scares me, the unknown. But I have also started to believe that all possibilities only exist in the unknown. And so that's another way that I've had to make the shift of me being uncomfortable in not knowing exactly the plan and where I'm supposed to be going. Because like you mentioned, I like to know where I'm going. And now I'm kind of in that place too, where for advocacy, like, I like the drug stuff, but for me, I think that the message is way bigger than just the drug safety work that I do. But I don't know exactly where it's going. So that means I have to come back and do my old rules, which is being uncomfortable in being, or learning to be comfortable in being uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's a huge factor in growth, right? I think that when you go through these phases, sometimes you take those breadcrumbs and then you go down a path and then all of a sudden you have momentum and you're going, and you're growing and growing, and then it slows down and gets quiet again. And then you're like, oh, what now? Like, oh my gosh, I thought we were moving. I thought this was it. I thought I was going this way. I use a great example real quick about like our restaurant business, how, we thought, oh, it's 10 locations in 10 years and we're cranking and we're doing the plan and we wrote the plan and the plan wasn't that. And when the pandemic hit and we closed our second location and then we had to pivot and go do these pizza kits and that turned into be a thing and we were like, oh, this is it. And then that slowed down. And then out of that birthed something else that we're now down the path of. And so it's trusting the path. It's not going to unfold exactly like you think it is. You just have to keep taking that next aligned move and trusting that the next thing that's unfolding and the next thing that's unfolding, no one has it all figured out.
I know people hear it's trite sometimes or they think it's cliche, but like the universe is actually working for you.
Right.
And not against you. And I think that also is a mind shift of you're the one that is, first, it has to go through your belief system. Because a lot of times, like, I would never have chosen what happened to me, right? But I got to choose what I did with it, right? And how I responded. So I think that same thing is whether it's the little big things in life that happen or the little things.
Yeah.
That is the one thing that we as individuals, and it's kind of that free will, we get to choose how we respond to something and what do we do with it. And does that become like negative? And then, energy is just energy, right?
Right.
And so it's like, does it attract? What are you attracting? What is your thought? What is your main thought process and your mind? Is that what you're putting out? It's not that the world's against you. You're just attracting what you put out.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And going back to what you said about just you would have never chosen this for your life, although I have someone that I'm working with right now who's super interesting, and her philosophy is we actually did choose. We do choose the path before we're born for a purpose, to learn certain lessons so that we can become the version of ourselves that God intends us to become on this earth. And he didn't promise it was going to be easy.
No, I'm laughing that you said that. So one of the people in my life that I got to spend a lot of time with was Wayne Dyer. And that was just a random, like there's no random. I just started reading The Power of Intention, and his daughter happened to live in Minneapolis. And so it's crazy how I met him. But anyways, he was the first, and I spent a lot of time in Hawaii with him, and he was the first one that said, Kim, has it ever occurred to you that maybe you and Woody chose to come into the world to do this? And I was like, so I had to sit with it. And then, well, first of all, it's one of those things, what if? Maybe. So like, if that is a shift in perspective, right? But then I look and go, wow, it almost had to be somebody like Woody and me to go do this. And I'm like, maybe we did. And it's not what we did. It's like what all my growth that I've learned about myself. And it'll still get me emotional, right? Because I'm like, whoa, maybe that was like this amazing, and coming back, that we spent our whole life trying to come back to where we came in and who we were supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly. It's so, Oh, it's deep.
It is deep.
It's deep.
It is
and
deep.
It's a thought that, a lot of people ponder what, the meaning of life and where do we come from and all these things. But I think just getting back to trusting that your path is here for a reason. And that's no matter if you're going through something that you went through or something that doesn't feel that big, but maybe to you it is. Ask yourself in that moment, what is this trying to teach me, right? Like, why am I going through this instead of, what's happening to me again? And this negative, like being the victim as opposed to the victor. Like, how can we choose to look at it differently and take our greatest pain and turn it into our greatest purpose? And I think it is a choice, and you've definitely exemplified that in so many ways. And the fact that you just keep going and keep growing, and you had this huge thing that you've done for 22 years, and now you're building even beyond that to make an even bigger difference. It's just so amazing, and we have so much to learn from you, Kim. I mean, I feel like you're one of those people who's just like, I'm just like sitting here cheering you on, going, what's next for Kim, because it's going to be really, really big. So I'm so grateful to you for being here, and we will continue to follow you and support you in everything that you're doing. And I'm so grateful to you opening up to my audience and sharing your story, because it is so powerful and so profound, and what you're doing in the world is amazing. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I, whatever you need, I'm here for you too, because.
Grateful you were brought into my life.
Thanks.
And that's it for us, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this episode beneficial. And if you feel compelled to do so, share it with a friend who might benefit too. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Reach out to me anytime on my website at jenmentasana.com.